So it had cluttered up Jack Harris's dining table for almost 8 years. Yet the 86-year-old was determined to finish his nearly 4-foot by 5-foot, 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Then when he placed the final piece, which he thought after painstaking process it took to complete, he'd step back to admire the picture he had created, only to find that somewhere in the middle, one piece was missing. He searched his home for the missing piece. His family's worst fear was that somewhere, sometime, one of their dogs had eaten that piece. In order to help him, though, to complete what he had started, his daughter-in-law went even as far as contacting the manufacturer to see if they had a spare piece. The problem was that the fact that Mr. Harris took nearly 8 years to complete the puzzle, they had stopped making that puzzle in that time. So Eve, his daughter-in-law, who gave him the jigsaw puzzle as a Christmas present, said she thought it would be a challenge for this retired businessman to complete, because every year, as a tradition, they would give him a puzzle and he would often have it done before spring ever hit. He was so adept at jigsaw puzzles that he was not challenged enough. And so this puzzle proved to be different. He said he started the jigsaw, which shows the 19th century oil painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son, by James Tissot, as usual. And after 8 years, he was still struggling to finish it. When asked, Eve said, "We got him this one as a bit of a joke, really, because he always boasted he could get them done so quickly. He's a bit of a whiz with them. It was marvelous to see it finally completed, but when we saw there was one piece missing from the middle, we couldn't believe it." He was disappointed when he found that one tiny piece was missing. It's sad because it'll never be completed. How many of you have ever put together a jigsaw puzzle? Have any of you done one of those odd-shaped ones? I tried. It lasted all of about 3 hours before Stephanie and I packed up the box, the puzzle, and put it away. It was actually somebody had given us a puzzle of stained glass windows. It was a threesome of stained glass windows in the shape of that in the back of our sanctuary. There wasn't a straight edge to be found. But can you imagine spending almost 8 years trying to put together a puzzle to get to the very end, thinking you had it done, and you're going to step back and look at this gorgeous painting and realize that somewhere in the middle there's this white dot because you see the table through? And what a totally dreadful feeling it must have been for this guy, because I can't imagine the hours that he put in putting this puzzle together just to find even to just find those outside border pieces, to realize that after 4,999 pieces, you're missing one. And I imagine that no one in his family could place a value on that one tiny piece. I mean, imagine how much that piece would be worth to someone like Mr. Harris. He poured himself into finishing a seemingly unfinishable task. I know what that feels like. I have a cross stitch at home that I have been working on for 6 years. Mostly because I pick it up and put it down for 3 months, pick it up, put it down for 3 months. But it's one of those tasks that somehow, some way I am going to finish, but it is taking a lot longer than I ever anticipated. I've gotten to a point in that picture where I can see that glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, that hope that comes that the project will actually be completed. And now I've come to realize I don't have enough thread to finish the project. Now, For anybody who does cross stitch, you know you don't carry stitches on the back very far because that's what happens. You run out of thread if you do that. Friends, I don't carry thread more than 3 or 4 stitches on the back of my pictures, and I'm still running out of thread. Imagine how that feels. And I'm so close to finishing this project, and I have to buy thread, and I'm hoping that the dye is close enough to match the rest of the picture so that it doesn't look out of place. I think I have a small inkling of how Mr. Harris might have felt when he looked at that puzzle. But I'm determined to finish it, even if it takes another 2 or 3 years, much to Stephanie's dismay. I hope not, as long as I don't keep finding other things to do in the meantime. But it stands to reason, and if something is important enough, do we not assign a value to it in our hearts? Yes? No? Maybe? Are you guys with me this morning? Okay, good. I mean, think about it. Maybe you received a trinket from a grandparent. Maybe it was a cross. Maybe it was a ring. Maybe it was your grandmother's wedding ring. It may not hold a lot of financial value, but it holds a lot of sentimental value to us, right? We're placing a value upon something that's physical for us. Maybe it's something that if you could not find it, you start searching the rest of the house to try and find it, right? Has anybody ever experienced that before? Okay, all right, good. Otherwise, this was going to be a really challenging sermon this morning. You need to keep that kind of feeling of dread in your hearts as we go throughout this time and begin exploring this story from Luke. Because we're among Jesus and his followers again, which likely includes huge crowds of people, his disciples, some Pharisees and scribes, and the dreaded sinners and tax collectors. Can you believe that he actually sat with people like us? He did. All of these people have come to hear Jesus teach, and he doesn't disappoint. It's in this passage from Luke and the one that follows that Jesus gives us a glimpse of what it'll be like in heaven when we bring someone into right relationship with God. So let's consider these stories for the moment. At least 2 of the 3 stories that are in our Bibles. First one is the story of the lost sheep, right? We all know this story. How many of you can recite that story back to me right now? Right, we hear it every year. It's not something that's unfamiliar. How about the story of the lost coin? How many of you can recite that one? Yeah, right? But here's the thing. I think we always focus on that one sheep or that one lost coin. But I'm not sure that's really the point that Jesus is trying to make. So stick with me here. We need to remember that God celebrates every time someone is brought home, so to speak. It's a valid point to make, and I do not want to discount what we typically talk about with this story. The thing is, though, like our memories of the things that happened in the past, I wonder how many people began to tune out when we started that story of the lost sheep. We begin to focus on some other things in our lives. So I want to shift our focus this morning, okay? You with me? I want to shift our point of view. I want us to consider what it means to be the shepherd this morning. With any amount of luck, I'm not the first one that brings this to your attention, but friends, I'm hoping that you are all like the shepherd in this story. You are the one who has 100 sheep. I know that's a stretch for us. None of us are shepherds, but try. You are the one that relies upon this sheep to provide milk for your family, to provide fleece for you to shear. The sheep are the way that you help your family with income when you sell off the offspring or trade them for other needs. These sheep are your life. Knowing that these sheep are what you rely on in your life, what exactly would you be willing to do if one of them wanders off from the rest of the flock? Right. Yes, We're all willing to go looking for that sheep, right? They're our livelihood. They're what we rely on. And this is exactly why Jesus uses this example in this particular story for those gathered around him. But most importantly, to tell this story to the Pharisees and the scribes who felt that it was not their responsibility to care for those who may be wandering on the fringe of society. And then we take it one step further. Jesus uses an example that would have set those around him on edge. He uses the example of a woman and her lost coin. Remember, women were traditionally thought of as property. They did not have a position in society. We were not considered to have any worth. And yet Jesus uses a woman who likely had an entire life's savings in those 10 silver coins. Bear that in mind. That was likely her entire life savings. Those 10 silver coins were likely what she would have relied upon to sustain her for a long period of time. And so with that knowledge, again, it's a no-brainer as to why she would turn the house upside down looking for that one lost coin. I mean, imagine you had, like I said in my example earlier, $50 rolls of coins. If you lost one of those, you would have looked really hard to find it, right? I wouldn't have let Kevin get away with taking that coin. Sorry, Kevin, you're just easy to pick on this morning for some reason. But seriously, I mean, would we not look high and low to try and find it? It was probably a month's worth of wages for her. It would have actually held more value than that because as we are not told that she had a husband or a son to care for her, that silver coin meant that she didn't really need to rely on someone else to provide for her needs. She was likely someone on the fringe of her society, and she would have done anything to find that coin. And each of these examples would have challenged those gathered around Jesus that day. That shepherd, likely not a Jew, was on the fringe of society because they didn't own a home or have anything of value in their possession. Their whole life was based in being a nomadic and journeying with dirty, filthy animals. They laid down on the ground to sleep and had no status. That woman was someone who likely was just trying to survive in a patriarchal world. She may not have had anything to her name, likely had nothing in her name. She was someone who would have needed to rely on others for her needs and to trade for her because she was, well, a woman. She was someone without status and ability to make sure she could survive. She was on the fringe of her society. We're no different today from that shepherd and that woman. We've already established that if our lives and our livelihood are dependent upon it, we would have searched high and low to find whatever we might be missing or have wandered off or lost. And that made me wonder this week, do we really go looking for those on the fringe of society? Do we really act like the shepherd or the woman in search? Or are we more like the Pharisees and the scribes? You see, in today's world, welcoming everyone to the table is often a challenge. Sometimes we want to say that everyone is welcome, but in reality, in our hearts, there's this caveat or stipulation or requirement that someone must meet in order to be welcomed to join us at the table. And I would argue that these two stories and the one that follow challenges us to think differently about what it means to open the table. Think about it this way. When that shepherd found the sheep and brought it back, he invited all of his friends and his family and his neighbors to rejoice with him. It's not that he didn't celebrate the 99 that stuck together and didn't wander off because they were safe. But rather, when that one came back to the flock, it was a great joy to have the whole together once again. If you like the lost coin imagery better, then it would be like that woman spending the entire silver coin to celebrate finding it. Being willing to spend the entirety of what she had lost to rejoice in having the whole back together so that she could share her joy with as many as she could. You see, the Pharisees were so stuck in their traditions and their laws that they had forgotten to invite others to join them so that they could continue to grow themselves. When we're faced by people who challenge our thinking, that is when we grow. When the sheep and the coin are found, the whole is whole once again, and that is the point. When the whole is whole, there is great joy to be had. And I know we are really good about celebrating when someone joined us. I'm a recipient of that joy. But there are so many who have been pushed outside of the church because of who they are, how they feel, or even how they might look. And that sheep and that coin are just waiting for someone to come look for them and invite them back into the whole. And so our job is not only to find them, but to make sure that when they are brought home, that we rejoice that they are part of our family. Amen.